Thanks for being here. My name is Bruce Pearce, and I'll be navigating us through the discussion. We have three fabulous presentations, and as Melanie said, we're going to be holding the discussion until the lunchtime, but you'll have plenty of time for us to discuss it over our working lunch. I'm a community development worker with the St. John's Community Advisory Committee on Homelessness, and our discussion this morning, I was thinking a little bit about what's the objective behind this conversation we're embarking into, and so forgive me if I refer to some notes as I provide a bit of context before we hear from our presenters. I think it's really to help us explore service integration models for preventing, reducing, and ending youth homelessness. And why? Because it's a theme that many of you have direct experience with developing in your own communities. Everyone's at different stages of development, so it's a conversation we want to have with each other. And primarily because of the promising results that models are showing for young people at the end of the day. So we hope this will be an enriching discussion and a lively one when we get to the lunch break and also when we hear from our presenters, because it's everyone's experience that young people, and including our own service providing organizations, are trying to navigate a system that is in many respects not a system. It's fragmented and not connected. In this context, there's a need more than ever to have a discussion and an action plan around what are a range of integrated service models that really work for young people and are showing results in the country, and to ensure that the voices of young people are heard in developing those approaches. We're going to be hearing from some excellent models that are doing just that here in Canada. And for its part, the federal government, through the Homelessness Partnering Strategy, is sponsoring our discussion this morning in an effort to do just that. Unfortunately, our colleagues from HPS couldn't be with us today, but we're recording this session so that it can be accessed by people across the country. And you can go back and hear it afterwards and share it with your own colleagues, which is really cool. The format for our discussion will involve three presentations on the theme. One prepared by Stephen Gates with the Canadian Homelessness Research Network, who's developing a Housing First manual or toolkit focused on youth homelessness, and he's seeking our engagement in developing it. And this will be used presumably across the country. And in Steve's absence today, we'll explore his presentation together. He's posed a few questions for us, and at the lunch break we can use them as prompts if we wish around, can Housing First work for young people? How must it be adapted to be effective? And but those are by no means the only questions. You'll have your own that we need to use to make the discussion happen. Following Steve's presentation, we'll learn from two community case studies which respond to youth homelessness through integrated services and Housing First approaches. First, we'll hear from Elspeth McKay of Operation Come Home, who's here with us from Ottawa. Welcome. And after that, Paula Soper of Choices for Youth's Moving Forward program. And I'll ask them, for the benefit of our listeners and participants, to introduce themselves. We won't be reading your bios, so feel free to say what you'd like about your experience and what you're bringing to it. I'd also, a couple of observations to leave you with before we go into the presentations. In thinking about this last night, I'm learning myself, as all of us are, about what service integration implies. And for me, I feel that it implies addressing the continuum of needs that young people at risk are presenting with. It's very diverse, it's integrated. It's also something that happily is within reach of individual organizations, not all organizations, but it's within reach. It's something we can start with, and certainly for collaboratives of organizations wanting to work together at a local level or even regionally. But it is, in my mind, it's distinct from system integration, which by definition transcends organizational boundaries, just has to, and typically calls upon larger systems like child and youth services and so on to be engaged. But I think we can lead the way in showing how it can happen. And service integration is also a direction that many are moving towards. It's appealing, primarily because of the desired outcomes that it's having for young people. And it also provides organizations an opportunity to adapt and reinvent themselves. As the CEO of the U.S. National Alliance to End Homelessness, Nan Roman, said at her conference earlier this year, we talk a lot about coordination. But she said, to her, coordination simply implies everybody knows what everyone else is doing. doesn't mean they're doing it together. So at the end of the day, what's the outcome? So it doesn't propel the necessary change that service integration and system integration does. So, and here in Canada, HPS is very receptive at this moment before the program is renewed for the next 5 years. And we have a requirement, we're expecting in the directives for the homelessness partnering strategy that all communities will be shifting to incorporate housing first in their approaches. And what does that mean for young people? And specifically, that's going to mean for the 10 largest communities in Canada that participate in the $119 million program, that 65% of those federal dollars need to be spent by communities through their local plans they're developing this winter on housing first approaches. For the other 51 medium and smaller communities, including my own, a minimum of 40% of federal dollars need to be spent on housing first. So couldn't think of a better time to have this conversation to help reposition the shift to housing first in a context that's going to work for young people. So with that, I'll go into Steve's presentation, and it's fairly brief. The main question of his manual and toolkit that he'd like to develop with us is, can housing first be adapted for youth? And we'll be looking at what housing first is, specifically the definition of it briefly, the concerns about its applicability in the context of youth homelessness, and how can we move towards a framework of housing first for young people, a framework of service integration. In terms of what is housing first, we need to have clarity, Steve says, about what housing first is in order to begin the conversation. So the definition here is that housing first is a recovery-oriented approach to homelessness that involves moving people who experience homelessness into independent and permanent housing as quickly as possible with no preconditions, and then providing them with additional services and supports as needed. The underlying principle of housing first is that people are more successful moving forward with their lives if they are first housed. Everything else can follow. There are also core principles that underline housing first, and here they are. Immediate access to permanent housing, as we said, with no housing readiness requirements. Consumer choice and self-determination. A recovery orientation. Individualized and client-driven supports, and social and community integration. It's a package of principles. And later on, Steve poses these principles back to us during the lunchtime discussion as prompts for a question. Are these the right principles? Do we need to redefine them? Is it a program or a philosophy? Well, according to this slide, it's a bit of both. The philosophy of housing first requires a programmatic approach, a systemic approach, which is embedded within the philosophy. And then the program models are listed here that you're familiar with. The clinical side, the assertive community treatment, intensive case management, a lot of housing support workers and so on and so forth, and other supports, and then rapid rehousing, moving people quickly into housing. Often in a team setting, all of those are team models. What kind of supports are needed? Not surprising, housing, clinical, and complementary supports. In fact, many of the things you're already doing in your communities already. I won't read them all out exhaustively. We'll be returning to them later when Steve prompts us with the questions, are these the support models we need to be talking about in this context? So just reflect on it briefly now, and we can go deeper later. What kind of housing is needed in a housing first framework specifically? Well, transitional housing isn't permanent stable housing in the context of the housing first classic definition. Scattered site is where a lot of this is relying, as you know, and this implies independent living, tenant holds the lease, mostly private sector, but could be social housing, and a lot of it is already existing housing in the community, and you make it work with the wraparound support, so it's not a lot of building new housing. And then here is where you're looking at developing or adapting permanent supportive housing as part of it. I won't go into part two. This is for the lunchtime discussion, so we can end this part here. And I'll ask Elspeth to share her presentation with us. So welcome, Elspeth.
Okay, So good morning, everybody. As you know, my name is Elspeth McKay, and I'm from Operation Come Home in Ottawa. And my background is in homelessness, employment, and social enterprise primarily. And I started my career working at a shelter in Ottawa for people that had been barred from every other shelter in the city. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and I did street outreach for 2 years in downtown Skid Row and South Central Los Angeles. And then I came back and started an organization called Rideau Street Youth Enterprises, which back in the early 90s, we developed and operated 5 or 6 social enterprises simultaneously in Ottawa. And then I ended up doing some work in mental health and homelessness. And my last and final career hopefully will remain at Operation Come Home. And so I thought I'd start just by talking a little bit about Operation Come Home. I know we're here to talk more about the housing, but I'll start with that. So the history of Operation Come Home, we started in 1971, and we started by working with youth that had run away from home that wanted to be reunited with their families. And in 2002, we started to realize that there were a number of youth in Canada that were not able to go home for one reason or another. And so we decided to start to diversify some of our programs and services in the city of Ottawa. And so we still do reunite, and we reunite about 75 to 100 youth per year, and that is basically 1/6 of what we do today. And just to give you some idea of how many people we're serving, we serve about 350 youth a year. Of those 350, about 292, or exactly 292, are actually doing some type of employment opportunity. They're enrolled in our high school, or they're doing some type of professional or personal development. And so the demographics, this is what our site looks like in Ottawa. The demographics of the youth that come to Operation Come Home are similar to the ones that Dan would be seeing at YSB. So they would be primarily homeless or at risk of homelessness. Probably 70% would be street homeless or couch surfing. There aren't enough youth shelter beds in Ottawa, as Dan can attest to, so a lot of them don't have an actual place to stay unless they're staying in the adult shelter system. And so basically the organization is made up of 2 different streams of opportunities, the work stream and the matters stream. And the work stream is all of the different types of employment interventions we offer, including an entrepreneurship program, an individual support and placement model for employment. And we also offer 5 social enterprises. So we have FarmWorks, which is a farming program. We sell CSA shares, and we also sell to local restaurants. We grow vegetables on 1 or 2 acres of land at a local farm. We have a commercial bottle pickup business called BottleWorks. We have a beer delivery business. And we have Beadworks jewelry business, this is one of the pieces from Beadworks. And we also have a storefront called Repurpose, which is filled with stuff that the youth have made from Operation Come Home, but also a number of other social enterprises, both internationally as well as nationally, and a number of local artisans as well. So the emphasis is on recycled, upcycled, pre-loved product and young people. And then Housing Works is under this portion of the agency as well. And so the Matters programs are the things that matter to youth. What matters to youth are all of the things that we talk about on a regular basis. And so these are all what we consider to be the support services that keep youth in school or working or housed. And so those are all sort of the wraparound basic services. We don't do a lot of counseling or clinical type services other than addictions. We do have a half-time addictions worker on site. So we would be referring to YSB or some of the other, the local hospitals and that sort of thing for those sorts of services. So for Housing Works, the criteria for selection for our Housing Works project are that youth need to be either working full or part-time or enrolled in school, not necessarily our school, but any school. Could be at the college or university level, but for the most part, it's either at an alternative high school or doing independent learning or that, credit accumulation of some kind. So the youth agreed to take financial literacy as well. We were lucky to receive a grant from SETI TD Bank in Toronto here to do a research project on financial literacy, and so part of the deal, if youth want to sign up for our Housing Works project, is that they have to agree to take financial literacy. They obviously have to agree to get some support, and we want them to save money, because when we did our strategic plan 3 years ago, we asked youth, would you like to be given a certain amount of money for your first and last month's rent so that you can move into a place, into a scattered, permanent place, likely market rent, because there aren't a lot of subsidies and the list is really long like it is everywhere. And the youth basically said, we'd like that, but we'd rather have to save some money of our own, and then if you could match or double or triple the amount that we save, then we would like you to do it that way. So we serve youth between the ages of 16 to 30, and we're not able to accept more than 10 youth into Housing Works a year, and we have never actually taken a full 10, simply because of the sort of the emphasis on all of these things having to happen at the same time. So as we know, youth are provided with multiple types of housing options. In Ottawa, the majority of those options would be the first three, which is what YSB does: shelter, transitional, and temporary housing, whether that's couch surfing or living with a number of other youth in one small apartment, or whatever that type of sort of temporary housing would look like. Housing Works basically provides opportunities in congregate and permanent housing. Congregate being something new that the City of Ottawa and Operation Come Home have started to work on a little bit around youth only, and that is that there's been a lot of research done recently that young people today would prefer, in some circumstances, to live in a congregate type setting. So in a house, for example, with 3 or 4 other peers, and possibly somebody living there as well, a student, a university student, or something like that. But a lot of them are identifying because they left home. They're probably out of, certainly the kids at Operation Come Home would be kids that have been graduated from CAS, Children's Aid Society, or foster care, and so they haven't often had a family, any type of real family, for a very long time. And so they feel the need to be able to live in that type of environment. So we try to help youth select whatever type of housing they want. Unfortunately, that's not realistic, in the sense that for a bachelor apartment in Ottawa, it would probably be between $917 to $1,000 a month. So that's not necessarily realistic. So congregate would be definitely less expensive in some ways. But the other thing is that the youth that sign up for Housing Works are, as I said before, either employed or in school, and they're getting housing support. So they're getting all of those 3 things at the same time. And I compare it to what we used to call an employment first model. Instead of housing first, we were calling it employment first, because there was so little housing available in the City of Ottawa that often what was happening is youth were coming into Operation Come Home, working in one of the social enterprises or one of the other employment options, saving enough money to get a place of their own, and then moving into an actual apartment instead of the other way around, simply because it wasn't practical any other way because of the amount of money they would receive on a monthly basis. So financial literacy I've talked about, and the matching program, basically we provide, if a youth saves $333 when they're enrolled in Housing Works, we will match that with up to $1,000. And so we fundraise that money, and that's part of the reason why we can only take up to 10 a year, because we only have $10,000 that we can invest in that toward youth if they do in fact save that money. And the reason for that is that the reason why we decided to do the matching, other than what I spoke about earlier with our strategic plan, is that we had some advice, and there was some research done through the National Alliance to End Homelessness in the United States. And we had a policy analyst come and spend some time with us back in 2010 when we started Housing Works. And basically what he was saying at that time was that for those youth that are chronically homeless, and when I say chronic, I mean homeless for, let's say, 3 to 5 years, that if they were given a small injection of money for first and last month's rent, and they had been chronically homeless for a significant amount of time, and they were motivated to either find work or finish school or do both, that they were 70% more likely to be able to maintain housing after the first year. And so we really started this model because of what we learned about at the National Alliance. And so statistics for Housing Works, just to give people some idea, we started Housing Works in 2010. We housed 25 youth in that time period. 18 of those youth are still housed today, so they're still housed. 14 of those 18 are working full-time. 2 are in college and working part-time, and 2 are currently looking for work. And so what happens is that the housing worker, if they lose their job or they drop out of school, part of the criteria for the first year is that that worker has a very small caseload, but if they lose their job or they drop out of school or they want to change jobs or whatever the reason is, our goal is to maintain them in housing. And so that worker's primary role is to work with them on employment, school, and housing retention. And so if the person needs other wraparound type services, many of which have already been pointed out in terms of clinical, then they likely would be referred to someone else at Operation Come Home or outside of Operation Come Home. And so the youth profile, I'll give an example of a youth that is working in Repurpose. So she is one of the youth that operates the shop. She's in college part-time, and she's been enrolled in Housing Works for 3 or 4 months now, and she's just moved to her first apartment and is hopefully going to finish college and is working almost full-time, even though I say part-time, in order to be able to pay her rent. And so that is a good example of the sort of youth that would be enrolled in Housing Works. So support functions, other than the ones that I've already talked about, the emphasis for us is employment, school, and financial literacy and housing. But there are lots of other support functions that the youth require, so we do provide a lot of the same things that all of you would provide in terms of basic needs, furniture, crisis intervention, addictions, mental health supports, other types of counseling, and all of that stuff can be, most of it can be provided to youth at Operation Come Home, but if we can't get it, then we would do an external referral. So what we found is that the preference for youth is to live in scattered or congregate housing units. They're not looking to live in a situation that is with a whole bunch of other youth that are quote unquote just like them. They would prefer to remain anonymous and live like anyone else in a regular apartment building somewhere in the city where the supports can come to them or they can meet up with whatever they need. Partnerships are important, and I'll talk about a partnership that we've just started to work with another agency in Ottawa, and I've talked about the educational employment programming already. So just to say that we do operate, and I sort of didn't go over that at the beginning, but we do have a high school at Operation Come Home. And so we have a teacher that's there full-time in partnership with the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and we're funded through Rogers Communications. And so we have graduated about 46 kids in the time that the school's been open with high school diplomas, high school certificates, and we've also helped with GED. And so it makes it very easy for us because we have a lot of those services around employment and school already on site. And so it's easier to work with youth when they're there doing whatever it is they've chosen to do. Now that does not mean that if they're working or in school somewhere else that they wouldn't be considered for Housing Works, but they would have to be associated with Operation Come Home in some way. So we were recently approached by another agency in Ottawa called, it used to be called Project Upstream, but now they've changed the name to Upstream. Not sure why that is, you know. Anyway, Project Upstream is a housing provider that provides housing to people that have mental illness or concurrent disabilities. And they have recently received some money to put some emphasis on youth housing. And so they were looking for a partner that they provide the apartments, some of which are social housing and some aren't. And they also provide all the clinical supports. So they have a psychiatrist, a social worker, and some of the other counseling supports that many of our youth would require. And so we've started to talk to them about getting some units. And they've offered us, at this point, 2 units for some of our youth to live in. But they've also offered us a house. So this would be where the congregate living would come in. Now, we have not, in fact, started to do that yet because we don't have the resources, so we're sort of searching for some more money to be able to do that. But that is sort of the direction that we're headed in. So we want to sort of test out the congregate living thing. We did a survey with the youth at Operation Come Home to determine how many would be interested in scattered permanent housing at market rent and how many would be interested in congregate living. And so basically what that survey showed, and there were about 40 youth that filled it out, and we just did it over a couple of days. It was very, you know, it's not empirically valid or anything like that. We just wanted to get sort of a quick and dirty idea of what people wanted. And so what we found is that 56% wanted to have scattered independent living, and the remainder would prefer congregate living, but they would also take scattered independent if they could get it. But their preference was congregate. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So the success of having a housing provider that's not necessarily providing all the services that we provide can be beneficial because they're providing the units and you're going in and providing all those other services that the youth require. And so we think that that's going to work really well. So we're working with the City of Ottawa on formalizing a partnership with Upstream, and the City of Ottawa is in fact the person that funds us through HPS to do our Housing Works project. And just to give you some idea of how much money we get from them, $27,000 a year is all we get. And so that's another reason why we can't take more than 10 youth. So here's just a few photos of some of our graduates. This is our farm social enterprise, and that's our Bottle Works social enterprise. And so we think that it really makes a lot of sense to incorporate the employment and school into the Housing First hybrid model, because for youth, many of them have hopes and dreams, many of which will likely be fulfilled at a certain period of time, and it takes time, but it's more likely that they'll be able to stabilize and find a good job or finish school or go to college or university, and we found that ourselves. And so we think that that's a key piece to the model. And we also think that, you know, if you're moving someone into a market rent unit, if they're not working, they're not going to be able to sustain that apartment anyways. So it's kind of letting them down if they don't have the ability to be able to maintain their lifestyle. And so rather than hope that they'll be able to survive on rent supplements or welfare, ODSP, whatever income they're getting, we would prefer to try to move them forward into mainstream society through work and school. So I talked a little bit about the National Alliance to End Homelessness. And basically, as I said, the research shows that if you give a quick infusion of cash, which is matched, not handed out, that 70% of youth that are chronically homeless will remain housed with these types of supports. I don't know how much time I have. I'm good for time, am I? I should just, maybe 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we got some money to do a 2-year research study, and that was a financial study. But basically, the research question was, would financial literacy help youth maintain housing, jobs, and school? And so we're at the end of that study, and one of the interesting things we found out about it is that there's a link between financial literacy and addictions. So, and we were not anticipating that link. So what we found is that basically when the youth were going through the financial literacy program, that they were realizing that they weren't going to be able to keep up their drug habit or their alcohol consumption level, because they simply are now starting to understand that they don't have enough money for that. And so they were finishing financial literacy and going and talking to the addictions worker to try and figure out how they could reduce their harm and reduce their consumption so they could afford to actually be successful in Housing Works. So that was a very interesting thing that we found out. I've already talked about the research showing that, the recent research, according to the City of Ottawa, showing that congregate living is an important option for youth. And then I did mention briefly the IPS model, which is one of the models we use at Operation Come Home. It's a supported employment model. It came out of the mental health sector, and it is one of the models like Place and Train, Train in Place, social enterprise. But IPS is very similar to Housing Works in the sense that it uses the very same principles around choice, what kind of job, what rate of pay, what sector, and it's very individualized, like the sort of thing that we do with the youth that are enrolled in Housing Works. So I just wanted to use that as a comparison. I pointed out as well that youth didn't want a hand out, they wanted a hand up, which I thought was interesting. And in some circumstances, youth are capable of living independently at a young age, depending on where they came from. If they came through the foster system or the CSA or Children's Aid, they may not be as ready as some of the others, but there are often a lot of youth that have recently left home that if you were to move very quickly into an independent situation, it could be very fruitful for them. So in summary, this is our fundraising campaign that we've recently launched at Operation Come Home called Back the Fight. This is one of our youth, and she also works in our shop. So in summary, a hybrid housing first model needs to be adopted for youth, but I don't think it should have necessarily the exact same principles that Stephen Getz was speaking about earlier on his PowerPoint. It needs to embrace as many housing first principles as possible, but youth require different types of interventions, keeping in mind that Housing First was adopted primarily for chronic mentally ill middle-aged people. So a hybrid model is what I would recommend, and it does make some difference around the urban-rural. Certainly rural around employment or school could make a difference on whether people would be able to be successful in a rural area if there aren't a lot of jobs. And as I said earlier, Ottawa doesn't have a lot of affordable housing, and so market rent is pretty much all that's available. The subsidized waiting list in Ottawa is about 10 years long, about 9,700 people, I believe, on it. Yeah, so just over 10,000 people waiting for subsidized housing in Ottawa. And we found that a lot of youth don't want to live in subsidized housing because in Ottawa, the housing hasn't been maintained and it's not very nice and it's not in safe neighborhoods. And although it's affordable, it can be very dangerous. And so the youth that we work with are full of hopes and dreams just like anyone else, and we believe that they can, in fact, accomplish whatever goals they want. So this is the last slide. So youth are interested in finding careers and finishing school just like anyone else. The wraparound supports, if they're in place, the multiple wraparound supports in one place without housing attached to the agency can be beneficial. And so what I mean by that is the partnership with Upstream, for example, where they're providing something very concrete in terms of bricks and mortar and clinical services, and Operation Come Home is providing the other wraparound type services like employment and school. What the youth have said is that they feel in some circumstances that there's a stigma attached to them when they're living in shelters or in transitional housing because there are a number of other youth that are there that are quote unquote in the same bucket, and they don't necessarily like that. And so lastly, youth want choice and should not have to live in accommodation based solely on what's available, but based on what their choice is and what they really want. And so that's all I have to say at this point. And I guess we're not getting questions right now, right? We're going to do that at lunchtime. So I'd just like to thank everyone for their time, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker, Paula.
Hello, everybody. I just want to first of all say thank you very much for inviting me to come here to discuss and talk about the program. My name is Paula Soper, and I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland, and I currently work for Choices for Youth. I've been working in the field for over 20 years, and I began in the recreation and day camps and that sort of thing, and moved to Calgary and worked in a treatment facility is where most of my experience is for high-risk youth, and returned home to St. John's in 2009 and was hired by Choices for Youth to develop, implement, create a program for at-risk youth and for young people who have complex needs. So took the challenge on. We were a pilot project, and I got to remember to move the slides. So basically, when I was hired, it was to do this. There was research conducted around youth in Newfoundland between the ages of 16 to 24. In St. John's, we do not have a residential treatment facility, so we had a lot of young people that were leaving the province, going out of province and returning home. So when these young people would return home, they had zero or next to nothing, little resources or support in the community. So Choices took it on, and we developed, we now call it Moving Forward. You know what Choices for Youth is. But basically, we had created a housing first model to meet the needs of the risk and of many at-risk youth who struggle with complex mental health issues. I never put this in the slideshow, but I'm going to go there. Because we talk about complex mental health issues. What does that mean? What does it look like? Our youth in our program, what I did was I wrote some notes up on the current diagnoses that they come with and their addictions and their other housing issues. So for example, right now we have generalized anxiety disorder, ODD, cluster B personality disorder, disruptive behavior disorder, panic attacks. That's one person with one diagnosis that's coming from wherever environment with little zero supports, with no housing. Another one, attachment disorder, ADHD, sensory integration problems, high functioning, autism, borderline personality disorder, intravenous drug user, history of cardio, and I never can say this right, never, had heart surgery, so endocarditis, and history of eating disorder, one person with all these complex needs. So the level and the intensity of support that these youth require is absolutely amazing. So basically what we have done, we have offered intensive support. We currently have 5 staff right now in the process of hiring another one, and 1 team lead and program coordinator, so 6 of us in total. We currently serve 10 young people. And right now, this is the services that we offer. So this is a young person, the foundation of our program, and engagement is priority. We really try, and I'll talk about the tier system and what that looks like. Housing is definitely by far one of the most prominent thing that we try to get them in when we first get them into the program, because it's very hard to work with youth when they're homeless and they're on the street, even to find them and give them their medications and to bring them to their appointments or court or any of these things. So educational services, transportation, I mean, all the services that was discussed earlier. So basically, our model is based on 4 interlocking components: the mental health, transitioning, homelessness, and key services, which was listed earlier. And everybody here has a copy that you can go through. All this is in your booklet. So housing, clinical services, medication distribution, education, recreation, and as you can see, the list. So basically, the Moving Forward team is comprised of the staff that I just talked about, and we work Monday to Sundays, evenings, weekends, mornings, and basically we strive to, and we do this through a 3-step tier system, and what that means, and I'll get into the services that we do as I describe the tier system. Oh, yeah, I have to talk about this. When a young person comes into our program, we assume the role as case managers. So what we don't call ourselves case managers, we call us support leads, because we're trying to change the language with the youth, so they don't see us as clinical. They see us as, oh, we're going to support them, we're going to help them out in the community, we're going to do whatever it takes. And we actually did this through, the program changed when I learned about the Outcome Star. And that's a tried and tested tool for managing outcomes of work. And we use a homelessness star, and there's 10 different areas in the homelessness star. So when a young person comes into the program, we actually sit down, lack of better words, interview, sit down and have a chat, conversation around the 10 different areas to see where they're rating themselves. And it's unbelievable what you get from them when you sit down and do the Outcome Star. Because what we think that they should be working on is not, we're already starting off at the beginning stage of, this is your goals. We don't even say the word goals anymore. We now say, what changes do you want to make in your life? And what does that look like? And what areas? And based on the numbers that they give us, usually if it's 3, 4, that's usually the areas that they want to work on. And you can find out more about that, and you can go on the internet and look up Outcome Star, and that's it. So through the Outcome Star, and because of all this happening, and it really changed the dynamic in the overall program. So what we looked at then was a tier system. And the tier system, I'm very excited to talk about because it's really defining our program, and it's really helping us provide hours of support to young people. So when a young person comes into our program, based on where they come from, so they come from incarceration, out of province treatment facility, or they have lack of skills and they can't function in the community at all, what we do is that we will provide them with 18 hours of individualized visits. So that's one-on-one, 18 hours a week. 6 hours of group visits. We also provide a cooking group on Monday nights and Peace Out to Wellness and Recreation that's offered to them. We provide medication distribution. So we will have staff go in the community, go to their house, make sure that they distribute the medication. And then we do additional hours for medical appointments. So we try to have someone on in the daytime that's flexible, so when crisis comes up or court or medical appointment that's outside these additional hours, we can provide that. So it's very flexible in the approach. So basically, and I'll talk about how you go from a Tier 3 to a Tier 2 in a minute, because it's geared towards Outcome Star. So the qualifications are here: not utilizing community supports, engaged in high-risk behaviors, ongoing medical support, transition into community from out of province, and struggling with addictions. So when a young person, usually in a Tier 3, comes to our program, they've already come with separate people in their lives. So they have psychiatry, they have this one over here and that one over there. So what our job is to do is that we provide support. We get all the players together, we sit down once a month, and we do our support plans, support meetings. We also sit down with the youth to review them, and then we celebrate their successes every month is what we do with the young people. And they seem to like it. So at Tier 3, inability to self-regulate emotions, lack of motivation to pursue individual goals, so they still need encouragement, trying to get them engaged, more engaged, lack of motivation to pursue individual goals, limited connection with external support. So this is where we start. Here, we're just trying to get them engaged, period, and get through housing, all the task-oriented stuff. Because when they first come in, I find we're getting IDs, we're getting this, we're getting that, and we're very task-oriented. So by the time we do that and they get used to us and they're building the connections and the support, that's when they'll go down to a 2. Because we now know them, we've gotten to know them, we know how to support them better. So it's 4 less additional hours, I believe. No, 10. 10 hours of individualized visits in a Tier 2, 6 hours of group visits, that stays the same for everybody. Medication distribution for everybody, and additional hours for medical supports, meetings, and crisis support. And so you can see how this goes. Tier 1, they transition into independence. So this is now, we're helping them go into the community, live independently. They're leaving the youth system, they're going to the adult system. So now we're saying, hey, we've been at this now for 2 years. The usual stay is what we're finding now. Our current young people have been there about 2 years. And same thing, we provide 4 hours of individualized visits. The one thing I don't have here on this slideshow is that we also provide support after they leave the program for up to 3 months. So that could mean drop in, but we definitely will try our best attempt, and we have been doing it, to see the person minimum of 1 to 2 times a month for 3 months. So I just described that. That's the tier system. So this is where we're at, and this is where the Outcome Stars helped me create the program and give us more of a guidance, I guess, in terms of what are we doing in these visits and how are we supporting these youth and what does this look like and what does it mean. So basically our desired outcome in a Tier 3, so this is the person that's coming from out of incarceration, hospitalization, out of province treatment. They come and we are trying to get them engaged, just in general, in their life, in the community. Develop an awareness of community resources and supports, because they probably don't know what's out there and they don't have any idea of how to get to it and get the supports. Recognize high-risk behaviors and display a readiness for change. And the other one is exhibit stabilized behaviors for an extended period of time. This is our goal. This is what we want them to do in a Tier 3. And hopefully their goals. Probably not at first. They probably don't realize what their goals are, but eventually they will. Needs analysis. This is what the barriers are for them while they're not getting their desired outcomes. The tools. These are the tools that we use as a moving forward staff team. We develop a report in order to get them to engage with us in the moving forward team. We provide a safe environment. We distribute medication and finances. That's another thing that we do. Instead of the checks going to them, their checks come to us, and when they get to a tier 1, they will get their checks. But in a tier 3, when they first come, we try to help them around the supporting of addictions and not spending and blowing their money in finances. So when they come to a cooking group on a Monday night, we will give them their personal allowance checks after the cooking group. So it's they get fed, they learn how to cook, and they get their check. It's like a bonus. And they also get grocery money, and we've divided that up into 2 checks a month. It's not very much. But we bring them out to go grocery shopping and help them make some good choices. They don't always do that, but we try our best to encourage, good choices. So basically, once we try to get them engaged, these are the tools that we use. And the indicators of success is through our daily written reports, and that would be attending 80% of the visits. We don't tell them their scheduled visits. We sit down with them at the beginning, and we say, hey, what works for you? Really? Are you a morning person or a late, a night person? Do you want to go in early? So, and they can change it from month to month. Things change. They might get work. They might have a job. So you really need to be flexible, and it's working. It's really. They're coming. So desired outcome, and right here, developing awareness of community resources and supports. The tools that we use there is start engagement prior to intake. So if we have someone that's incarcerated, we're not going to wait till the day that they get out of incarceration. We go down probably 2 or 3 months before we know that they're coming into the program, and we start the process right away. And we try to, hey, just to see our face, get familiar with us, so all of a sudden I'm not coming down and going, come on, you're coming with us, right? So that's one thing that we do, and we've been doing that more so. Utilizing community resources with staff supports. So staff will bring them out in the community, and they will show them around and not tell them, but bring them. Transportation is key in our program. Provide a safe environment, so access to food and phone and transportation and computers. Indicators of success there is that they display increased knowledge of community supports. How do you know that, right? How do you show that's how that they're displaying these things? Because they identify change in the area of meaningful use of time from being stuck to accepting help, and that's the outcome star. So that's how we describe and we get our indicators of success. So the tools here for recognize high-risk behaviors is we acquire life skills and coping mechanisms to make positive change, harm reduction approach, provide a safe environment, again. And indicators of success here is a desire to seek support and demonstrates a reduction in high-risk behaviors. So that will be told in the written reports, and I guess less hospitalization stays. Then the next one is identifies change in the area of emotional and mental health from being stuck to accepting help on the outcome star. The next tool, exhibit stabilized behaviors, participate in ongoing medical support from professionals, ensure medical needs are being attended to, and transportation. So indicators are medically stable and taking ownership of one's own health. So they're taking their medication, or they're coming to the office and getting their medication. We hold it in our office. Identifies change in the area of physical health from being stuck. So once they've demonstrated these indicators of success, we're looking at them going, woohoo, you're doing awesome. So guess what? We're going down to a tier 2. So what happens then is that they went from 18 hours to 10 hours of individualized visits. That's the difference. And the difference is the tools that we use also. So our desired outcome here is that they maintain attendance and meaningful use of time during visits. Because a lot of times you go on a visit, and sometimes at first when we started, they were like, I think they thought we were a taxi cab company, and so they'd start the visit and then they want to get dropped off somewhere. So it was great. So we had to put some stipulations around that, and now they're amazing actually. So when they come now, they come with a purpose, and it could be relationship building. It doesn't need to be task oriented all the time. It could be relationship building, because what we have found over the past 4 years is that it's a good year. It's a good 6 months in, and they're starting to build trust, and then after that, it's a great partnership. So maintain attendance and meaningful use of time, relationship building, provide safe environment, use of external motivators, and support meetings. And again, that's highlighting the successes that they do each month. Indicators here is engage in visits 80% of the time and completing a task agreed upon by the young person during the visits. So when we sit down and we do their support plan, when they first come into the program, with Outcome Star, we do that once every 3 months, but we do it with the young person every month. So we sit down, because things could change. You know, if they have housing, next month they might not, and it might be due to the landlord selling the house, as the example I use. So they might have been at a 10, but now all of a sudden they went to a 2 or a 3 on the Outcome Star. It's not a bad thing. This is their journey. This is, you know, how do we support this change? So this is what our tools that we use. So provide increased motivation to make change. When they first come in, they're not very motivated, you know. They've had a rough go, and when they come, we try to really do this by providing opportunities to try new things. So we bring them, when we provide them experiences like camping and, you know, sea kayaking and walks, you know, that they probably never ever in the park, or, you know, that they haven't done. Provide support to build on success, and provide support to overcome challenges. So, as we know, there's always challenges. The one thing that I find about providing this intensive support for the complex needs youth that we have is not as much crisis. We're not a reactive, so we're supporting them through their challenges. I mean, there's crisis, but it's not as bad as what it used to be when they first came into the program. So we're really seeing a decrease here. Engage with community resources and external supports. Provide a safe environment and seek community resources with staff support. Increase engagement with community resources and meaningful interactions with external supports. And another indicator is identifies change in the area of meaningful use of time. So are you hanging out all day, or are you actually, you know, trying to get some education or work, or putting referrals in? Do you need support with that? Do you need support phoning the landlord? Like, we will sit down and support them through all the different areas. Then they go to a tier 1. And we've actually, I have a little written up, I guess, summary of the program from a young person that actually has been through these stages and has moved on successfully and is doing extremely well. And the tier 1 she moved into, and it's so fearful. They've had this support for almost 2.5 years, and all of a sudden in their mind they're thinking, oh my God, you're leaving me, right? So how do you transition a person now with feeling, I'm ready, I don't need you guys, you know? Like, how do you do that? It's hard and it's challenging, but it's about starting the process 2 or 3 months earlier and getting them prepared and having them focused. This is not a negative thing. This is a great thing. You have just, like, oh my gosh, like, you're amazing, right? So, and we did it, and she's really doing well. She's confident in herself now, and I'm so proud of her. So the desired outcome here is stabilize independent living skills, housing, groceries, finances, medication, appointments. So we'll start this a while where we're giving them back slowly, you know. Go do your groceries, come back with the receipts after, we'll sit down, we'll talk about what you bought, you know, instead of us going with them to do it. So it's about more independence here. And so obtain clothing and grocery receipts to encourage money management. Supports through weekly check-ins, so we'll keep checking in with them. Empowering independence with medical supports from professionals, and support with taking public transportation. Because up until then, they're used to us driving them. So that is a little bit of a downer. But anyway, indicators here is identifies change in the area of self-care and living skills, and now they're gone from learning 7-8 to self-reliance. Desired outcome here also is utilizing new community resources, positive experience transitioning to independence, engage young person and part of the exit planning. Absolutely, they have to be part of it from day one. And support with anxiety related to transition. So this goes to, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave. I don't know how I'm going to do it without supports. Indicators here is that more than 2 support systems or point of references prior to exit. So when they leave, they have somebody. So they're not leaving the program with all this intensive support and all of a sudden now they don't have anything. So we ensure that they have two supports in their lives. And attend programming employment 90% of the time. That's external to our program. That means going to school or could be work, job related. The other one, desired outcome here, is managing own activities, programming, and our employment, and accessing supports when required. Tools here is provide support aftercare, provide support and counseling as required. So not looking at them and shutting them down because we're busy with the other youth and you're no longer in a program. you come in, we're going to sit down, we're going to chat. Or if we can't do it right now, come in about another hour. But making sure that they are still cared for after they leave. And the indicators here is reduced need for support for moving forward, and identifies change in the area of motivation and taking responsibility from learning to self-reliance. And these are just some pictures of them doing some. So this is moving forward believes that as young people begin to work within this framework and make progress towards change, their lives will be enhanced and they will be successful within the community. Moving Forward provides monthly progress reports as well as a monthly review of individual goals for the young person and those involved. I didn't talk about this at the beginning. We have 10 young people, and 5 of the young people that we have are through the Department of Child and Youth Services. So we are in partnership with them. The other 5 people that we have right now, we're able to, they could be living home. Like we have a young person who was hospitalized for 2 years but is still connected to home, so now we're working with the mom. What we're seeing more so lately is a lot of family work that we're doing more of, intense. There's more kids, young people coming now with their family and their families involved, which is a great thing. So right here is something that one of the young people wrote, and I really wanted to read this out because it's very touching and talks about the work that we do. I have been with the Moving Forward program for 2 years. They have been more than just supports to me. They were my family. No, not blood relatives, but family. The kind that would stick by your side through not only good times, but the bad as well. The kind of family that showed up and claimed you, whether you were in shackles, pajamas, hospital gown, or a graduation suit. I do not know exactly what it is about Moving Forward that made me change my life around. But I think that it was the staff more than the program itself. I always knew there was someone who cared, someone who was a positive influence, and someone who showed me there was more to life than I thought. Whether they were blasting music, telling you stories, listening to yours, bandaging you up, getting blood work done, pushing you down a ski slope, breaking into your tent and tickling you, bringing you for apartment viewings, or just driving around, they were always there to make me feel wanted, safe, and happy. Now I'm going out on my own, and I could write a book about Moving Forward has done for me. But that is not necessary. The memories and lessons learned are enough. You would have to be part of this program to see what they are really all about and what they do, because it cannot just be seen, but felt. So I'm going to end this presentation with that. Thank you.